What happens when a desperate royal crash landing turns into a global joke and a silent princess steals the spotlight without saying a word? In a jaw-dropping new South Park episode that's already setting the internet ablaze, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle parachute onto the royal balcony during Trooping the Color, only to be tossed out by cartoon guards like unwanted party crashers. Meghan, dressed in a dazzling red gown, screams at the crowd, "Why are you clapping for her?" as Princess Kate arrives in golden silence and is met with roaring chants of future queen. What does this savage satire reveal about how far public opinion has shifted? Why is the world laughing now, and what does this mean for the Sussex's royal identity? Stay with us, because the truth behind this cartoon may be far more brutal than fiction. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It begins with a balcony and a golden carriage. Across the world, millions of viewers tuned in expecting tradition, spectacle, and military precision, but no one expected the animated chaos that unfolded on a primetime parody screen shortly after the actual event concluded. In a single broadcast, South Park didn't just poke fun at the British monarchy, it torched a cultural fault line with comedic precision, tearing open royal tensions, celebrity theatrics, and public loyalty in the most savage and unapologetic way possible. The satirical firestorm took direct aim at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, while simultaneously elevating Princess Kate to a level of grace and composure that few public figures ever attain, fictional or not. A cartoon. That's all it was on the surface. But this was no ordinary episode. South Park's newest animated assault opened with the blaring horns of royal celebration, only to shatter the dignity within seconds, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry parachuting literally onto the Trooping the Color balcony uninvited. They held a tacky banner in their hands, blazoned with desperation. "We're still royals too." The Queen's guards, drawn with exaggerated frowns and muscular stiffness, moved swiftly. Within moments, cartoon Harry and Meghan were being physically thrown off the sacred balcony like unruly nightclub guests overstaying their welcome. The laughter was uncomfortable, then explosive, then viral. It wasn't just comedy, it was commentary. A reflection of everything that had been bubbling beneath the surface since the infamous Megxit. And for once, the court of public opinion wasn't divided. It was roaring. So what just happened? How did a cartoon capture global headlines overnight? And more critically, what does this brutal lampooning say about the public's evolving attitude toward Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? As they watched their animated counterparts crash a royal tradition and get ejected to uproarious applause, did they realize something irreversible had just shifted? In this video, we'll break down every critical moment from the new South Park episode that didn't just humiliate the Sussexes, it may have dismantled their remaining credibility altogether. We'll explore the symbolism, the reaction, the parallels to real-life events, and why this fictional portrayal may cut deeper than any royal analyst's words ever could. We'll examine how the satire didn't stop at comedy. It pierced the myths Harry and Meghan have crafted in the years since leaving the UK. Their quest for freedom, dignity, and independence was rebranded by South Park into a desperate, attention-hungry stunt. Meghan, in a glimmering red gown, tries to outshine Kate, who silently arrives in a golden carriage. The difference? The crowd ignores Meghan. They chant for Kate. "Future queen. Future queen," they cry. It's not just a cartoon scene. It's a mirror, a reflection of what millions now see and believe. Why did Meghan's character scream in cartoon fury, "Why are you clapping for her?" while Kate's royal doppelganger simply smiled and waved in serene composure? Why was Harry reduced to a stumbling sidekick, carried by Meghan's ambition and failing PR tactics? And why does this moment matter more now than ever? Let's begin by grounding ourselves in the reality of how Trooping the Color has historically been treated, an unshakable tradition, a show of unity, a performance of continuity. From the Queen's reign through to King Charles, it has never been about individual stardom. But in this South Park episode, that dignity is shattered when cartoon Meghan tries to weaponize glamour and outrage. Instead of standing among the royal family, she crashes in, uninvited, and is thrown out. The metaphor could not be louder. But here's what makes it more chilling. The world laughed. Not awkwardly, not hesitantly, but with the kind of deep, cathartic humor that only comes from watching something that feels too true. There's a reason this episode is being called the final cultural nail in the Sussex narrative. Because parody only works when it reflects a shared truth. For years, The media has battled over how to portray Meghan Markle. Was she a victim of royal racism or a calculating manipulator of public sympathy? Was Harry a brave prince cutting ties with a stifling institution, or a misguided husband enabling his partner's agenda? South Park didn't choose sides. It burned them both. And what makes the satire land even harder is who stood in contrast to their fall, Princess Kate. In a show known for its crassness and absurdity, Kate's animated version was drawn in a moment of still, dignified grace. She floats, she waves, she says nothing. Yet the crowd chants her name. Why? Because silence, in the age of scandal, has become its own power. Kate's depiction wasn't just favorable, it was iconic. Meghan's character looked furious in a red dress designed to scream for attention, only to be drowned out by the gentle gold of a woman who said nothing and did everything. If you think this is just about cartoons, you're missing the bigger picture. This is about brand collapse. This is about the last weapon in the public discourse, laughter, being turned fully against the Sussexes. And once people are laughing at you, not with you, recovery becomes nearly impossible. But that's not where the story ends. Because after the episode aired, something stranger happened. Rumors swirled that Meghan, upon seeing the cartoon, left Los Angeles in a fury. Social media lit up with tracking data, alleged sightings at Dubai International Airport, and anonymous whispers claiming she was emotionally crushed and needed to escape the noise. Harry, reportedly blindsided, stayed behind. Their team? Silent. Is this the start of another rebrand? Another documentary? Or the beginning of a true retreat? Throughout this video, we'll examine not just the animated events, but the real consequences already beginning to unfold. From international headlines to insider leaks, from PR fallout to cultural shifts, the impact of South Park's newest episode isn't fading, it's intensifying. We'll take you inside the logic behind the satire, decode the deeper meanings hidden in those scenes, and explain why Princess Kate emerging as the cultural victor was never an accident. We'll uncover how Meghan's public image became a cautionary tale, and why silence, grace, and quiet dignity have become the most powerful tools in the royal arsenal. And most importantly, we'll ask the question millions are now wondering in the wake of this cartoon. Is this the final chapter in Meghan and Harry's global credibility? Stick with us, because what comes next is a scene-by-scene dissection of the episode's most brutal moments, an exploration into media reaction, royal silence, public fatigue, and the uncomfortable truth the world is now willing to laugh about. The stage is set. The characters have spoken. The crowd is chosen. And in the eyes of popular culture, there may now be only one future queen. The South Park episode opens on a familiar but fictionalized version of Buckingham Palace, draped in Union Jack flags, echoing the pomp and pageantry of the real Trooping the Colors ceremony. The camera pans across a vibrant crowd of animated citizens waving flags, with loud, cheerful music blaring from brass bands below. Viewers are given a heightened sense of tradition, formality, and royal grandeur. It's all very classic until it's not. Within seconds, the tone shifts dramatically. Suddenly, a high-pitched whistling noise cuts through the soundtrack. The camera shifts upward toward the sky. Two small figures, arms outstretched and flailing, parachute down from the clouds with laughably exaggerated theatrics. They're wearing smug grins, royal sashes with their own crests stitched onto them, and holding a huge banner that reads in block capital letters, "We're still royals too." The crowd gasps. The cartoon queen's guards, who were previously standing immobile at attention, jerk their heads upward in alarm. The band halts mid-note. Silence falls over the animated royal scene as the two parachuting figures descend onto the balcony, uninvited, unannounced, and clearly unwanted. It's Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in full caricature mode. Their exaggerated features are unmistakable. Harry sports a disheveled red beard and confused, wide eyes. Meghan wears a form-fitting, overly sequined red dress with a plunging neckline, adorned with diamond accessories that glitter with absurd brightness. Her facial expression is frozen somewhere between forced cheer and bitter resentment. Once they land, the cartoon Meghan begins waving manically at the crowd with both arms while shouting, "Look who's here. Aren't you happy to see us? We're the real stars." The crowd doesn't react. There's a cold silence that hangs in the air like fog. Harry, clearly uncomfortable even in cartoon form, tugs at Meghan's sleeve and whispers, "Maybe we should have announced it." Meghan hisses back through gritted teeth, "This is the announcement." She steps forward dramatically and begins to speak into a bullhorn she pulls from her bag. As Duke and Duchess of Sussex, we hereby declare our continued relevance. We are still members of this family whether you like it or not. At this point, the Queen's guards spring into action with slapstick military precision. Two guards march up behind the couple and, without a word, physically grab them under the arms. What follows is an exaggerated, cartoonish struggle in which Meghan kicks and screams while Harry tries to help her but ends up tripping over his own feet. The guards drag the pair off the balcony, their heels screeching against the marble. The audience of animated spectators erupts, not in horror, but in applause. One elderly cartoon royal fan claps enthusiastically and mutters, "About time." This scene sets the tone for the entire episode. It's not just humor, it's a full-fledged evisceration of the public persona Harry and Meghan have tried to cultivate. The satire is sharp, relentless, and purposeful. And this is only the beginning. As the chaos fades, the episode transitions into its next major scene, Princess Kate's entrance. The shift is immediate and stark. Where Meghan's arrival was noisy, disruptive, and chaotic, Kate's entrance is one of pure serenity. The screen brightens with a soft golden hue as the sound of orchestral strings fills the air. From behind the palace gates, a golden carriage begins to roll forward slowly, pulled by 4 pristine white horses. The crowd erupts into cheers. Children on shoulders wave miniature British flags. Elderly bystanders remove their hats in a show of respect. The cartoon camera zooms in on the figure within the carriage. It's Princess Kate, rendered in glowing, soft animation. Her dress is pale blue with elegant embroidery, a nod to royal tradition. Her hair is styled in a classic updo with a subtle tiara glimmering under the sunlight. She doesn't speak. She doesn't wave frantically. She simply smiles, a calm, composed, timeless smile, and raises one hand in a gentle, understated wave. The crowd chants rhythmically, "Future Queen, future Queen." Then comes the moment that will live on in South Park history. The camera cuts to cartoon Meghan, now back on the sidelines, having freed herself from the guards. She sees Kate arriving. Her face twists into a mask of rage and disbelief. Her jaw tightens. Her eye twitches. She yells to the crowd in frustration, "Why are you clapping for her?" But the crowd ignores her. They keep cheering for Kate. Her words fall flat, echoing back at her like an empty chamber. In a last-ditch effort to reclaim attention, cartoon Meghan leaps onto the edge of a police barricade, arms flailing. She turns to Harry and shouts, "Do something." Harry looks around helplessly, his cartoon face a perfect picture of embarrassment and confusion. He responds, "Like what? They don't even see us anymore." The scene cuts again, this time to a close-up of the crowd. One person, a teenage girl with a smartphone, points at Meghan and says, "Is that the one who said she was silenced while doing Netflix interviews?" Her friend replies, "No, that's the one who talks about privacy every week on a podcast." The sarcasm is thick, brutal, and crystal clear. Meghan steps back in horror, as if realizing the joke is on her, and has been for a while. South Park doesn't just mock them as public figures. It mocks the contradictions in their public storylines. The cartoon version of Meghan doesn't understand why her attempts at spectacle aren't working. Her identity in the satire is entirely performative. Her outfits, her dramatic gestures, her desperate declarations, all meant to win attention, are now ineffective. The crowd has moved on. The next key scene shows Meghan returning to the palace gates one more time. This time she's holding a giant megaphone and a sign that says, "Royally Relevant." She begins giving a speech, in which she claims she has been ostracized and marginalized by the Crown Industrial Complex. As she speaks, cartoon graphics appear behind her showing her various brand deals, podcast appearances, and Netflix specials. The contradiction is blatant and intentional. The crowd murmurs again. This time, someone shouts from the background, "You said you left because you wanted privacy. Why are you on every magazine cover?" Meghan is stunned into silence. In an attempt to redirect attention, she grabs Harry's hand and says, "It's time for the duet." They begin singing a self-written ballad titled "Still Royal," which is so hilariously off-key and melodramatic that even the cartoon pigeons fly away in disgust. The crowd covers their ears. Cut to Kate standing nearby, hands clasped in front of her, smiling politely. She says nothing, and that silence says everything. Then comes the final blow. The episode ends with the camera zooming out as Kate stands on the balcony alone, bathed in golden sunlight. The crowd below sings "God Save the Queen" despite her not being queen yet. It's symbolic. She doesn't ask for applause. She receives it, not because she demands attention, but because she earns it through dignity. Meghan and Harry, meanwhile, are shown being escorted off in the back of a cartoon Uber, with a 1-star rating flashing across the screen. The driver turns around and says, "Where to now?" Meghan mutters, "Anywhere but here." Harry looks out the window and says quietly, "Can we just disappear?" Fade to black. South Park doesn't end with a punchline. It ends with a statement. This entire segment was crafted to reflect not just the public perception of Meghan and Harry, but to act as a cultural milestone. It reflects a major shift in how their narrative is consumed. Not through op-eds, not through interviews, but through satire, through laughter, and most damning of all, through silence, the kind Kate embodies effortlessly in the cartoon and in real life. This episode didn't just poke fun at royal drama. It painted a portrait, one of quiet power and manufactured noise, one of legacy versus branding. And in the closing scene, when the crowd chooses who to applaud, South Park doesn't ask questions. It provides answers, loud, clear, and unflinching. To the casual viewer, South Park's latest episode might appear like just another edgy take on celebrity culture, using its signature crude humor and visual absurdity to mock two of the most talked-about figures in recent royal history. But as with many of South Park's most impactful episodes, this one was built on layers, layered commentary, layered symbolism, and layered truths about a public dynamic that has evolved far beyond the palace gates. What looked like slapstick chaos on the surface was in fact a sharp, focused critique of Harry and Meghan's modern royal narrative, and the public's growing fatigue with it. At the heart of this satire is a pointed question. What does it mean to be royal in the 21st century? And more importantly, what happens when someone attempts to rewrite that meaning using spectacle, branding, and victimhood? Let's start with the parachute scene. The decision to depict Harry and Meghan literally parachuting onto the royal balcony isn't just an exaggerated gag. It's a satirical metaphor. It implies intrusion. It shows a pair who were not invited, not wanted, but still insist on inserting themselves into the frame. The banner they hold, "We're still royals too," is not a random joke. It encapsulates the central contradiction the show is targeting. The idea that one can abandon an institution, criticize it, capitalize on its rejection, yet still demand its validation. This moment crystallizes the notion that Harry and Meghan are obsessed with reclaiming a space they walked away from. South Park isn't accusing them of treason or betrayal. It's accusing them of contradiction, of wanting the status without the duty, the titles without the structure, and the public adoration without the decorum. The show mocks the fact that Harry and Meghan, despite leaving the royal family and declaring their independence, continue to seek relevance through their connection to it. Whether it's through book deals, Netflix docuseries, podcasts, or public speeches, much of their public presence is built not on who they are as individuals, but on who they once were, and who they claim to still be. Next is Meghan's glittering red gown. This isn't a coincidence. South Park animators chose red because it screams attention. It symbolizes boldness, vanity, defiance, all qualities that the show is suggesting Meghan embodies in the public eye. The cartoon's choice of a dress that's both overdone and inappropriate for the occasion mocks the real-world criticism Meghan has faced for allegedly trying to steal the spotlight during solemn or traditional events. In stark contrast, Kate's soft-toned, regal attire and serene demeanor emphasize grace over performance. One tries to shine, the other simply does. The gown isn't just clothing. It's a metaphor. It's the armor of someone battling irrelevance with glamour. It's the symbol of branding over substance. South Park uses that dress to pose a subtle question. When someone dresses like they're going to a red carpet event at a moment of national tradition, what are they really trying to achieve? Then comes Meghan's outburst. "Why are you clapping for her?" This line is the climax of her fictional breakdown, and South Park uses it to capture a very real public perception. It's not just a funny line. It's a cry of frustration from a figure who believes she has done everything possible to earn adoration, only to find it being handed to someone else without effort. It's an expression of a mindset that equates attention with validation and outrage with importance. But South Park's satire doesn't just target Meghan alone. It implicates Harry in that narrative as well, but differently. His depiction is less aggressive, more passive. He's shown as confused, dependent, and ultimately overshadowed. He becomes the second player in a drama where he once might have been the main act. This echoes the broader public perception that Harry, once a beloved royal figure with charm and grit, has been slowly pulled into Meghan's world of curated messaging and public grievance. The satire suggests that Harry has lost his agency. He's no longer acting out of conviction, but out of emotional obligation. The Queen's guards dragging the couple away serves as a symbolic enforcement of boundaries. The royal institution, represented here through stoic, silent figures, physically removes those who do not belong. This isn't just a joke about being thrown off a balcony. It's a deeper metaphor about cultural boundaries, about the idea that there is a line between being royal and being performative. And when that line is crossed, even satire takes notice. But South Park isn't just making fun of individuals. It's targeting an entire mindset. The commodification of personal trauma, the weaponization of victimhood, and the obsession with staying in the headlines. The scene in which Meghan pulls out a megaphone and accuses the monarchy of ostracizing her while standing in front of a billboard listing her lucrative brand deals is particularly damning. This moment mocks the tension between message and reality. How can one claim to be silenced while simultaneously dominating media cycles, signing multi-million-dollar content deals, and giving multiple televised interviews? South Park is not denying the possibility of pain or conflict. It's highlighting the contradiction of commercializing that pain while insisting it's ignored. The satire points to the paradox of simultaneously criticizing the monarchy and profiting from its legacy. It points to the paradox of leaving for freedom and yet demanding the privileges of what was left behind. The royally relevant sign is another scathing jab. It suggests a self-appointed significance, a desperation to matter. In the context of the cartoon, Meghan and Harry are no longer central figures of influence. They are shouting from the sidelines, trying to convince the audience they still count. This parallels what critics have been saying for years, that the Sussexes, despite declaring independence, are still caught in the gravitational pull of the monarchy. There's also a critique here of media saturation. South Park questions whether the couple's overexposure has led to diminishing returns. The teenage character in the crowd who sarcastically asks if Meghan is the one who wanted privacy but does a podcast every week echoes a sentiment shared by many viewers. The satire holds up a mirror to public fatigue. When a public figure's every move is framed as groundbreaking or traumatic, audiences eventually tune out. Then there's the Still Royal duet. It's intentionally cringeworthy. Off-key, overdramatic, painfully earnest. This musical moment is the ultimate mockery of performative vulnerability. It's not that the characters are singing, they're begging. Begging to be seen. Begging to be relevant. Begging to be believed. The message here is brutally simple. Once you resort to spectacle, you've already lost control of the narrative. Meanwhile, Kate does nothing and yet wins everything. This contrast is perhaps the most devastating element of the satire. South Park doesn't need to elevate Kate with praise. It elevates her with silence. In an era of overexposure, where every celebrity is vying for attention, silence becomes power. Composure becomes defiance. Dignity becomes a weapon. The cartoon's decision to give Kate no lines, no exaggerated expressions, and no gimmicks is the satire's way of declaring, sometimes, the most powerful statement is the one you don't make. And then there's the closing scene, Kate on the balcony, bathed in sunlight, with the crowd singing God Save the Queen. This isn't just a send-off, it's a coronation. South Park crowns her, not with a crown, but with public favor. Not because she asked for it, but because the contrast between her and the chaos surrounding Meghan and Harry is too stark to ignore. So what is South Park really saying? It's not simply that Harry and Meghan are hypocrites, or that they're annoying. It's saying that their narrative has reached a point of cultural exhaustion. That their story, once compelling, is now seen as cluttered with contradictions. That their presence, once powerful, is now performative. And in contrast, figures like Kate, who say little and demand nothing, are being lifted by a public that craves authenticity, grace, and quiet strength. The satire is also speaking to a broader generational shift. In a world where identity politics, brand awareness, and curated vulnerability dominate media, audiences are increasingly questioning the sincerity behind it all. South Park isn't declaring war on Meghan and Harry, it's issuing a warning to the culture that made them famous. Be careful who you crown. Be careful what narratives you reward. Because eventually, the laughter turns, and when it does, it's merciless. This episode may not change anyone's mind overnight, but it cements a perception already taking hold in global consciousness that the Sussexes have overplayed their hand. And in doing so, they've opened themselves to the one form of criticism that can't be countered with a press release: ridicule. As the South Park episode aired, it wasn't long before the internet erupted. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Memes exploded across platforms. YouTube commentators uploaded reaction videos in real time. Public figures weighed in with sarcasm, and royal watchers, both professional and amateur, scrambled to interpret what they had just seen. But one thing was unmistakably clear from the beginning. This wasn't just a comedy segment. It was a cultural event. The most telling part of the public reaction was not simply that people found the episode funny, it was how many people saw it as truthful. For something to go viral on social media, it must strike a nerve. And this particular episode struck several. The overwhelming sentiment across platforms like Twitter, now X, Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube was an outrage. It was catharsis. The episode seemed to give voice to a fatigue that had been bubbling under the surface for months, even years. On X, users didn't hold back. One viral tweet read, "South Park just did what the royal family never could, tell Harry and Meghan to sit down and be quiet." That post racked up over 80,000 likes and tens of thousands of shares within hours. Underneath it, replies ranged from gleeful laughter to deep dives into the hypocrisy that viewers felt the show finally captured. Another tweet said, "That moment Meghan screamed, 'Why are you clapping for her?' might be the most honest thing ever aired on TV." The quote quickly became a meme, with users inserting it into still images of the cartoon and pairing it with everything from politics to pop culture. But it wasn't just Twitter that was ablaze. On TikTok, creators began stitching scenes from the episode with their own commentary. One user reenacted the parachute scene using Barbie dolls dressed as Harry and Meghan, setting it to dramatic music. The video hit over 2.5 million views within a day. Another creator used the audio of Meghan's cartoon scream over footage of Kate arriving at previous royal events, emphasizing the stark contrast the show highlighted. Reddit threads dedicated to royal discussion saw unprecedented engagement. The r/royal family subreddit opened a mega thread titled "South Park's Newest Roast, Meghan and Harry vs. Princess Kate, Your Thoughts?" Within 12 hours, the thread exceeded 10,000 comments. Most top-rated replies echoed the same sentiment. That South Park succeeded in capturing what many had been thinking but were too afraid or too weary to articulate. On YouTube, the reaction was just as intense. Prominent commentators such as Neil Sean, Sky News Australia, and GB News uploaded reaction segments immediately following the broadcast. In one video titled "South Park Just Destroyed Harry and Meghan on Global Stage," a British broadcaster called the episode "the final form of mockery," when the clown mask is ripped off and you're not even funny anymore. You're just pathetic. Even American commentators, typically more neutral or favorable toward the couple, were taken aback. One YouTube cultural critic with over 1 million subscribers said, "This isn't even about royalty anymore. It's about narrative collapse. When satire becomes indistinguishable from reality, you've lost control of your image." Public figures subtly joined the conversation too. Piers Morgan, a known critic of Meghan Markle, tweeted a single emoji after the episode aired, the popcorn emoji. It received more engagement than any of his posts that week. Though he didn't mention the show directly, the context was obvious to everyone. Meanwhile, supporters of Meghan and Harry did attempt to push back, but their voices were noticeably quieter this time. A few fan accounts labeled the episode as distasteful, sexist, and borderline racist, pointing to the characterizations of Meghan's outburst and attire. But these complaints, while valid in some respects, struggled to gain traction. The overwhelming tide of public discourse had already shifted, and the energy simply wasn't on their side. This is key. The South Park episode didn't simply attract laughter, it created a moment of cultural unity among diverse groups. Whether royalists, monarchists, anti-monarchists, Americans, Brits, or completely neutral observers. Many found themselves in agreement for the first time in years. The performance art of Harry and Meghan's brand had become overexposed. Their image, once sympathetic and compelling, had become a parody of itself. South Park just happened to be the one to say it out loud, with millions cheering them on. There was also a more subtle kind of commentary happening online, through digital body language, if you will. The silence from prominent pro-Meghan media outlets was deafening. Several mainstream news platforms that usually cover the couple in glowing terms either skipped the episode entirely or provided short blurbs without opinion. That editorial silence spoke volumes. Equally fascinating was the reaction from comedy circles. Several late-night hosts referenced the episode indirectly in their monologues. One joked, South Park finally said what the British tabloids were too scared to print. They didn't just roast Meghan and Harry, they evicted them from cartoon Buckingham Palace. Comedians online praised the show's writers for their bravery in touching what many now consider a sensitive subject. In comedy forums, fans and aspiring writers dissected the episode for its pacing, symbolism, and its total refusal to walk back any punchlines. No apologies, no attempts at balance, it was pure satire. The deeper part of the online reaction came from ordinary people sharing their emotional exhaustion with the Sussex saga. Many wrote posts confessing they used to support Harry and Meghan, especially during the early days post-Megxit. They had believed in their mission to modernize royalty, challenge outdated norms, and protect mental health. But over time, they felt the message got lost in a cycle of media appearances, lawsuits, Spotify specials, and Oprah moments. South Park, for them, was a form of emotional release, a chance to say, "We're done." One post read, "I supported them when they said they were bullied. I cried during the Oprah interview. But now, watching this episode, I laughed harder than I have in months. That tells me everything I need to know." Another user commented, "There's a difference between privacy and attention addiction. This episode finally made me admit it to myself. They're addicted to being seen." And perhaps one of the most powerful reactions came from a user who simply posted a picture of cartoon Kate from the episode, standing silently on the balcony, and wrote, "Sometimes the best PR is none at all." The global nature of the online reaction is also worth noting. In Australia, the episode made primetime news. Commentators in Canada said it artfully exposed the fatigue surrounding Harry and Meghan's victim narrative. In India and Nigeria, where royal stories still make major waves due to Commonwealth ties, the episode trended across social platforms. The show's reach sparked debates in classrooms, podcasts, and even corporate offices where watercooler conversations turned toward cartoon monarchy. The South Park parody, in this context, transcended television. It became part of a global conversation about authenticity, relevance, and the ever-thinning line between influence and indulgence. Meanwhile, royal analysts were quick to point out that this kind of satire doesn't just roast people, it cements reputations. Once you've been parodied in this way, particularly by a show with a cultural footprint like South Park, it's extremely difficult to regain narrative control. The show's message was now being repeated, reframed, and reinforced across social platforms faster than any PR firm could counter it. And this leads us to the most potent aspect of the reaction: speed. Within 24 hours, the South Park episode had become the single most discussed royal-related media moment of the week. Overshadowing real-life events, public statements, and official appearances. That tells us something about the power of cultural satire in shaping opinion faster and deeper than formal press. In the days following the episode, analytics showed spikes in Google searches such as South Park Meghan Harry, Future Queen Kate, and Why Did South Park Mock Meghan? People weren't just laughing, they were researching. They were examining. They were reflecting. No formal statement came from the Sussex camp. No tweet. No acknowledgement. That in itself became part of the story. Some interpreted their silence as smart, letting the moment pass. Others saw it as strategic retreat. And a growing number believed it was because they had no effective response. You can debate the accuracy of the satire. You can argue about fairness. But you can't ignore impact. South Park didn't just spoof Harry and Meghan. It sparked a moment, a digital verdict, a social media referendum on two people who have lived in the eye of the storm since stepping away from the crown. And this time, it wasn't the tabloids or the firm that delivered the blow. It was millions of ordinary viewers across the world, typing, laughing, sharing, and moving on. In the days following the explosive release of the South Park episode, speculation surrounding Meghan Markle's personal reaction exploded with the same velocity as the parody itself. What began as a cascade of memes and online mockery quickly morphed into something more surreal. Unconfirmed but widely circulated reports that Meghan had suddenly left Los Angeles, spotted by several alleged witnesses at Dubai International Airport, looking distraught, incognito, and alone. At first, the rumor seemed like just another internet fabrication, a flash of digital gossip designed to keep the echo chamber humming. But the volume, consistency, and speed with which these claims spread added a strange weight to them. There was no official comment from Meghan's camp. No denial. No acknowledgement. The vacuum was instantly filled with speculation, and speculation is often the soil from which viral firestorms grow. What was most intriguing wasn't necessarily the rumor itself, but the broader context around it. Why Dubai? Why now? And if true, why flee at all? Multiple independent X accounts posted variations of the same claim. That a heavily disguised woman matching Meghan's build and face structure was seen being ushered into the VIP terminal at DXB Dubai International Airport, just 72 hours after the South Park episode aired. These reports included images that were blurred and inconclusive at best, showing only silhouettes or partial profiles, yet the online community was quick to draw conclusions. One post read, "Security pushed us back when we tried to take a photo. She was wearing an oversized hoodie, mask, and sunglasses, but the walk and voice gave her away. It was Meghan. She looked shaken." That post garnered over 2 million views in less than a day. Another viral post suggested that Meghan was not just traveling alone, but in a state of emotional distress. The user, claiming to work at an airline counter, wrote, "She had no entourage, no PR team, nothing, just a driver. She was booked on an open ticket under a different name, but the mannerisms were obvious. She was crying under her mask." Again, this claim cannot be verified. But what it triggered was not just disbelief, it triggered recognition. A growing section of the public, already tuned into the narrative that Meghan is intensely reactive to criticism, saw the supposed airport sighting as perfectly plausible. Many remembered Meghan's history with public image crises. From legal battles with tabloids to pulling out of public appearances due to mental health concerns, she has shown a consistent sensitivity to how she is perceived. Whether that reaction is genuine vulnerability or carefully managed narrative control has long been debated. But either way, the idea that she would respond strongly to a televised character assassination didn't strike people as far-fetched. And make no mistake, the South Park episode wasn't just criticism. It was character assassination, satire style. The show didn't mock her casually. It ridiculed her core public messaging, her personality traits, and most savagely, her authenticity. The notion that she might have fled Los Angeles in embarrassment or panic was soon accompanied by broader claims that Meghan was seeking a quiet place to regroup. Several anonymous sources, allegedly from inside the Sussex circle, whispered to smaller entertainment blogs that Meghan had been emotionally devastated by the cartoon portrayal, that she had not seen it coming, and that she felt utterly humiliated that even comedy now treated her as a punchline. Whether those sources are real is another question. But their stories aligned with a general public sentiment that Meghan, who has always maintained tight control over her image, would not take kindly to being portrayed as hysterical, desperate, and irrelevant in front of millions. Then came the deeper interpretation that the Dubai rumor wasn't about escape at all. It was about strategy. In this version, Meghan wasn't running away from embarrassment, she was disappearing to avoid giving the story more oxygen. By removing herself from the United States, even temporarily, she could reset the media cycle. In other words, this wasn't a breakdown. It was a recalibration. Some analysts speculated that Dubai could serve as a neutral zone, far from the tabloid battlegrounds of the UK and US, but luxurious enough for privacy and comfort. Others argued that it had more to do with meeting advisors or exploring new philanthropic branding opportunities outside of the Western media lens. After all, Dubai is home to countless global foundations, media moguls, and PR consultancies eager to reshape a public figure's image when under siege. What gave further fuel to these rumors was the sudden drop in Meghan's public visibility. In the days and weeks following the episode, there were no new press photos, no podcast updates, no social media activity, no red carpet appearances, nothing. For someone who had recently been in the headlines constantly, the silence was telling. Even her most loyal fan pages began to grow restless. Where is she? Why hasn't she responded? One prominent supporter group posted, "We don't believe these rumors, but we need her team to say something." This silence isn't like her. It is precisely this silence that allowed the Dubai narrative to harden into belief. In the absence of a counter-message, the internet did what it always does. It filled the gaps with imagination, assumption, and half-truths that felt true enough to go viral. But the question still remains, what if it was true? What would it say about the state of Meghan Markle's public standing if a cartoon could provoke such an extreme reaction? Not a lawsuit, not a press conference, but a quiet departure, without statement or spin. Some critics have seized on this point to argue that Meghan's so-called strength is mostly surface level. They say her years of controlling the narrative from Oprah to Netflix to archetypes were only sustainable as long as she held the spotlight. But once that light turned hostile, the cracks became visible. Once satire came into play, and people stopped feeling sorry and started laughing, there was nowhere to run. Others, however, interpret the silence and rumored departure as an intentional show of strength. Let them mock, one columnist wrote, and let her disappear. Because sometimes the smartest play is to go quiet while your enemies shout themselves hoarse. Yet this theory, too, is hard to reconcile with the nature of the South Park episode. It wasn't just an attack. It was a cultural verdict, a declaration that Meghan's brand had crossed into parody. And when the internet agrees with a cartoon, the damage becomes nearly impossible to undo. The Dubai rumor also raised questions about internal dynamics. Where was Harry in all this? If Meghan did leave, did he go with her? Or did he stay behind to manage the fallout? Some internet sleuths speculated that Harry was seen alone at a Montecito cafe during the same time Meghan was allegedly flying out. Others claimed the couple had a major argument over how to handle the episode's backlash. Again, no proof, just noise. But in the age of perception, noise is often as effective as evidence. And this brings us to another layer, the growing divide in how Harry and Meghan are viewed. While early criticism often treated them as a unit, the backlash is increasingly lopsided. Meghan receives the brunt of ridicule, while Harry is seen as complicit but pitiable. In the South Park episode, this distinction was crystal clear. Meghan was the instigator, the voice, the force. Harry was the lost puppy trailing behind. If Meghan did flee to Dubai, it's not unreasonable to consider that she may have wanted distance not just from media, but from Harry's inaction. Some online voices speculated that Meghan was angry he didn't immediately jump to her defense, or that his silence after the cartoon aired was interpreted by her as disloyalty. These claims, though speculative, reveal something deeper. The world no longer sees Harry and Meghan as a united force. The media has begun dissecting them separately, and South Park cemented that. One is the performer, the other is the prop. This dynamic adds a new level of pressure on their brand. Because without unity, their public identity fractures, and once fractured, it becomes easier to ridicule. It's also worth noting that Meghan has been here before. After the first South Park episode lampooned her in 2023, insiders claimed she was outraged, deeply hurt, and even considered legal action. Those threats never materialized, but the sentiment lingered. She does not take public mockery lightly. She never has, which makes the Dubai rumor, if true, not just believable but consistent. If anything, it aligns with the psychology of someone who values image above all else. Someone who built a global persona on being misunderstood, mistreated, and misrepresented, and who may now feel betrayed not by tabloids or royals, but by culture itself. The alleged Dubai escape, whether strategic or emotional, symbolized a retreat from the battlefield of perception, and the absence of response spoke louder than any statement could. In the digital age, silence isn't just the lack of noise. It's a message the world interpreted in real time, without waiting for confirmation. So whether Meghan truly flew to Dubai or not is, in many ways, irrelevant now. What matters is that millions believed she could. That alone speaks volumes about how far her public image has fallen. When a simple rumor fits the expected emotional behavior of a global figure, the damage to credibility is already done. If there's one figure in this entire spectacle who seems caught between two realities, it's Prince Harry. Unlike Meghan, whose public persona is often seen as calculated, vocal, and aggressively curated, Harry has increasingly come across as torn, pulled in conflicting directions by the weight of royal duty, marital loyalty, and personal identity. The South Park episode sharpened this division with merciless clarity. On one hand, it portrayed Harry as a foolish accomplice to his wife's theatrics. On the other, it revealed something far more brutal, a man who no longer knows where he belongs. The cartoon version of Harry stumbles through the episode like a dazed bystander to his own life. He follows Meghan onto the balcony with obvious uncertainty, fumbling with the banner, tripping over his own feet, and whispering hesitant objections that are instantly ignored. When the crowd fails to respond, he doesn't act with defiance or charm, he simply looks lost. This is not the Harry who once stood proud in military uniform at royal parades. It's not the cheeky, rebellious prince who made headlines for bending the rules but winning hearts. It's a man who has forfeited his agency in the shadow of someone else's narrative. And that portrayal hits hard because it echoes how much of the public now sees him. In the years following his and Meghan's departure from royal duties, Harry's identity has become increasingly difficult to pin down. Is he a disillusioned veteran fighting to modernize an ancient institution? A loving husband defending his wife from racism and media hostility? Or is he, as South Park suggests, a shell of a man who has lost his voice entirely? What complicates matters further is Harry's track record since leaving the UK. While initially admired for his courage in breaking from tradition, the goodwill that once surrounded him has been eroding. His memoir, Spare, drew both sympathy and criticism. In it, he detailed emotional wounds, familial betrayals, and deep-rooted trauma. But for many, the book crossed a line, not because it revealed too much, but because it lacked balance. It was personal, raw, and often scathing toward his own family, particularly Prince William and King Charles. Instead of bridging gaps, it widened them. Critics say the book painted Harry as someone deeply consumed by past grievances, unable or unwilling to let go. Instead of healing, he appeared to be amplifying old wounds. And through it all, Meghan loomed large, not as a peripheral figure, but as a key player in both his emotional transformation and his public presentation. So when South Park turned Harry into a cartoon sidekick, bumbling, submissive, and irrelevant, it wasn't just mockery. It was a reflection of how many now see him, not as a leader of his own story, but as a passenger in someone else's agenda. One of the most telling moments in the episode is when cartoon Meghan commands him, "Do something," as the crowd celebrates Kate. His helpless reply, "Like what? They don't even see us anymore," is more than just a punchline. It's a thesis, a declaration that he no longer holds the spotlight, the affection, or the control. That for all the noise made in the name of independence, he has become invisible in the cultural conversation. But how did Harry get here? Part of the answer lies in his original appeal. For years, Harry was the rogue prince, the one who laughed at protocol, who served on the front lines in Afghanistan, who dated women far from the royal mold. His flaws made him relatable. His distance from the throne made him safe. He was the royal you could have a pint with. When he met Meghan, the narrative shifted. Suddenly, Harry was not just the fun prince, he was a man in love, protective, and willing to fight for what he believed in. Their early interviews projected strength, unity, and hope. But as the couple's media presence expanded and criticism intensified, Harry's tone changed. He grew more defensive, more bitter, and more withdrawn. He spoke of trauma, but rarely of growth, of loss, but rarely of peace. And perhaps most significantly, his public speaking became less spontaneous and more rehearsed. The jokes faded. The charm softened. Instead, viewers were met with long-winded monologues about press intrusion, family betrayal, and psychological scars. Real concerns, no doubt, but packaged in a way that felt increasingly self-serving. In many interviews, Harry seemed burdened, not just by the weight of his experiences, but by the constant need to defend them. He often looked uncomfortable, as if trapped between wanting to speak freely and towing a line that had been written for him. And in the court of public opinion, that discomfort reads not as honesty, but as confusion. This confusion reached a peak during moments when Harry's statements appeared to contradict themselves. For example, he has repeatedly insisted on privacy while simultaneously producing deeply personal content. He condemned tabloid culture, then collaborated with major media platforms. He said he left the UK to escape toxicity, only to re-enter the public arena with a memoir, interviews, and docuseries. Each of these moves painted a picture not of a man forging a new path, but of one lost in the fog of mixed messaging. And this is what South Park captures with such surgical precision. By turning Harry into a mute, confused character who trails behind a larger-than-life version of Meghan, the show is saying what many people have already concluded. That Harry no longer feels like Harry. That the man who once stood for independence has become a symbol of codependency. That the prince who once drew global respect has become a joke, not because he dared to leave royalty, but because he failed to redefine himself afterward. What makes this portrayal even more damning is its permanence. Cartoons, by their nature, exaggerate, but they also distill. And once a figure becomes a recurring punchline in satire, the cultural perception hardens. The laughter may fade, but the image remains. So where does that leave Harry? Trapped, arguably, between two poles. On one side, his loyalty to Meghan, the woman he risked everything for. On the other, the growing realization that his public image has suffered because of that very loyalty. And caught in the middle is a man who still seems to care deeply about purpose, about mental health, about service, but whose voice is being drowned out by the louder machinery of fame and narrative. The Dubai airport rumor only intensified this perception. While Meghan was allegedly fleeing in shame, Harry was nowhere to be seen. If he did stay behind in Los Angeles, what was he thinking? Was he embarrassed by the cartoon depiction? Angry? Did he agree with it? Or did he, perhaps for the first time, see himself through the eyes of the public? These questions linger because Harry has not answered them, and he may never do so publicly. But the silence matters. The optics matter. And silence without presence, without action or clarification, often reads as agreement. It's also worth noting that the royal family has remained entirely silent throughout this entire media explosion. No statements, no denials, no hints of sympathy. The contrast is blinding. While Harry and Meghan once accused the firm of callous indifference, their silence now looks more like strategy. And in comparison, Harry's media overexposure, followed by his present absence, feels like a misstep he can't undo. So what happens next for him? If Harry is to reclaim control of his image, it will require something he hasn't displayed in years: separation. Not from Meghan necessarily, but from the narrative orbit that constantly pulls him into public drama. He would need to carve out a space of his own, not defined by family conflict, not narrated by trauma, not shaped by media cycles, but grounded in personal vision. But that path is narrow, and every cartoon, every meme, every viral tweet that reinforces the idea of him as a sidekick makes that path harder to follow. Prince Harry once stood at the center of global admiration, not for being royal, but for being human, for serving in combat when he could have stayed home, for laughing when others stood stiffly, for caring about mental health before it became fashionable. That Harry still exists, but he is harder to see now, buried beneath layers of PR, resentment, and media fatigue. South Park didn't just mock him, it warned him. It showed him, through laughter, what he has become in the public imagination. And if he was watching, really watching, he may have seen it not just as ridicule, but as a wake-up call. In an episode defined by chaos, confrontation, and cartoon mockery, one figure emerged untouched and unbothered: Princess Kate. The silent center of gravity in South Park's latest royal parody, Kate Middleton was not just portrayed positively, she was elevated, practically deified. Amidst Meghan's shrieking desperation and Harry's confused stumbling, Kate's animated depiction glided in on a golden carriage with such unshakable composure that even audiences unfamiliar with the monarchy could feel the contrast. The chant echoed, "Future Queen, Future Queen." It's rare for South Park, a show known for its irreverence, vulgarity, and universal cynicism, to depict any public figure with dignity. Yet here was Kate, bathed in golden light, saying nothing and doing even less, yet commanding total attention. In the visual language of satire, this wasn't just praise, it was coronation. And for those watching closely, it wasn't hard to see why. Kate's power in the episode was rooted entirely in contrast. While Meghan tried to outshine everyone with sequins, speeches, and stunts, Kate simply appeared. She did not parachute. She did not shout. She did not perform. She arrived. And in that arrival, silent, regal, almost angelic, she reminded everyone of something that had been forgotten in the noise of Sussex scandals, that true influence often requires no words at all. The creators of South Park didn't need to put punchlines in Kate's mouth. They didn't need to exaggerate her features, mock her accent, or give her a dramatic subplot. Her role was simple, a dignified presence in the storm. And that simplicity is what made her depiction so powerful. The cultural symbolism was unmistakable. The golden carriage she rode in on wasn't just a prop, it was a statement. It signified legacy, continuity, and grace. The carriage is a visual icon of monarchy, tradition, and time-tested authority. In contrast to Meghan's glittering red dress, symbolizing ambition, attention-seeking, and celebrity, Kate's vehicle was a metaphor for timeless royalty. She didn't need to sparkle. She was the sparkle. In storytelling terms, Kate's presence in the episode operated as the foil, an opposing force that reveals more about the protagonist through comparison. In this case, Meghan's desperation and loudness were thrown into sharp relief by Kate's calm and confidence. And the public saw it. They felt it. The reaction was immediate. On social media, thousands of posts celebrated Kate's portrayal as the embodiment of what modern royalty should look like. One viral comment read, "Kate said nothing in that episode and still stole the show. That's real power." Another said, "Meghan screamed. Kate smiled. The crowd chose." End of story. For many viewers, Kate's silence in the episode wasn't just artistic restraint, it was symbolic of her real-life composure. In the years since the Sussexes left the UK and launched their media blitz, Kate has rarely spoken publicly about them. She hasn't given interviews. She hasn't addressed rumors. She hasn't engaged the circus. Instead, she's carried on with her royal duties, her charity work, and her public appearances with quiet consistency. That consistency has built something stronger than spectacle: trust. In the public imagination, Kate has become the image of reliability. Where others brought disruption, she brought stability. Where others courted headlines, she stayed in the background. And over time, that background became a stage of its own. Her lack of drama became the drama. Her refusal to react became her brand. South Park merely packaged what many people had already internalized and did so in a way that confirmed her status without needing to exaggerate it. But there's another reason Kate's depiction resonated so deeply. She was earned. Unlike Meghan, whose royal tenure was short and fraught with conflict, Kate has spent over a decade moving through the ranks of royal protocol, public service, and media scrutiny. She wasn't born into royalty, but she adapted to it with discipline. She didn't chase fame. She waded through years of speculation, judgment, and comparison. And in doing so, she earned the public's patience and, eventually, their respect. This long arc of development matters. In the world of royalty, image is everything. And Kate's image has been one of gradual transformation, from William's college girlfriend to the poised Princess of Wales, and now the inevitable Queen Consort. Each step has been measured, intentional, grounded. South Park tapped into this trajectory without needing to narrate it. They didn't have to show Kate's history. They simply needed to contrast her stillness with Meghan's volatility. And the story told itself. The chant "Future Queen" wasn't just a throwaway line. It was a distillation of public sentiment. While Meghan has repeatedly challenged the institution of monarchy and portrayed it as a suffocating force, Kate has leaned into it. Not with rebellion, but with evolution. She has become what the monarchy needed post-Elizabeth, a symbol of continuity in a time of chaos. There is also the gender dynamic at play. For years, royal women have been scrutinized far more harshly than their male counterparts. Diana was hunted by the press. Fergie was mocked. Meghan became the subject of relentless online abuse. But Kate, through sheer endurance, has withstood the pressure. Not because she avoided criticism, but because she never allowed that criticism to define her. South Park's portrayal recognized this. In a show famous for treating every target as a joke, Kate wasn't the joke. She was the benchmark. Meghan failed to match it, and the audience saw that failure in full color. But the episode did more than crown Kate in the realm of satire. It repositioned her in the public imagination, not just as William's wife, not just as the mother of future heirs, but as a quiet counterforce to the excesses of modern celebrity culture. Think about what that means in a broader sense. In an age of influencers, clickbait, and reality TV-style branding, Kate's refusal to play the fame game has ironically made her more famous. Her lack of self-promotion has become her most powerful form of promotion. And South Park, of all shows, captured that irony with chilling accuracy. While Meghan in the episode screamed, stomped, and demanded applause, Kate stood still and received it without asking. That visual contrast, repeated again and again, wasn't just funny. It was culturally definitive. The public didn't just laugh at Meghan. They cheered for Kate. And in doing so, they cast their vote in a silent referendum on what kind of royalty they prefer. Not the kind who gives tell-all interviews. Not the kind who signs Netflix deals. But the kind who says nothing and still inspires loyalty. This moment matters because it represents a turning point. For years, the narrative war between the Sussexes and the royal family has been framed in terms of victimhood versus tradition, freedom versus institution, authenticity versus facade. But South Park bypassed that dichotomy. It didn't ask which side was right. It simply showed which side worked. Kate's depiction didn't try to justify the monarchy. It didn't attempt to moralize her role. It just presented her as consistent, calm, and unshaken. And in doing so, it allowed the audience to fill in the blanks, to make their own judgments. And overwhelmingly, that judgment was in her favor. This doesn't mean Kate is perfect, but it means she represents something people crave: stability. She doesn't provoke. She doesn't correct the record. She doesn't react to every headline. And in a media landscape defined by overexposure, that restraint is magnetic. So when South Park placed her on the balcony alone, framed in golden sunlight, it wasn't just a creative choice. It was a cultural acknowledgement, a nod to the idea that royalty, in its best form, is not about noise. It's about presence. And perhaps the most remarkable thing about her depiction was that it required no dialogue, no explanation, just an entrance, a wave, and a moment of stillness. That's how South Park crowned Kate. Not with a crown, but with credibility. Not with satire, but with silence. And that silence echoed louder than any of Meghan's megaphones, monologues, or media campaigns. For decades, the British royal family has navigated public opinion through a calculated, often delicate balance of presence and silence. Their weapon of choice has never been outspokenness or confrontation, but, instead, institutional stability and long-term public image management. The unwritten rule has always been never complain, never explain. But since Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's dramatic departure from royal duties, that philosophy has collided headfirst with something unprecedented. A self-created media machine run by two former insiders who chose to compete in the open court of public opinion. What followed has been nothing short of a full-blown media war. The South Park episode did not just mock Harry and Meghan's behavior. It made a pointed contribution to the broader conversation about this media war, exposing the widening chasm between the royal family's approach to image building and the Sussexes' relentless pursuit of narrative dominance. It reminded viewers of the differences in strategy, tone, and most importantly, effectiveness. On one side, we have the palace. Silent, still, selectively visible. Whether you agree with their traditions or not, the Windsors have remained loyal to a form of messaging rooted in ceremony, symbolism, and subtlety. Their power rests not in volume, but in continuity. They do not respond to rumors. They do not make media rounds. They operate as if the public will sort things out on its own, and historically, that approach has worked more often than not. On the other side, Harry and Meghan have taken a radically different path. They've weaponized the very media that Harry once claimed destroyed his mother. They've opened up their personal lives in books, interviews, podcasts, and documentaries. Every slight is amplified, every criticism answered, every silence filled. Initially, this strategy appeared revolutionary. At the height of the Oprah interview's popularity, it felt like a reckoning, one that might force the royal family to evolve or at least respond. Harry and Meghan were finally telling their truth, and for a while, the world listened. But as time passed, the tone of their messaging began to shift. The novelty wore off. The vulnerability started to feel rehearsed. The transparency morphed into what critics now call performative grievance. That's where South Park stepped in, not with an argument, but with a cartoon. And that cartoon did more to frame the media war than any speech or scandal in recent memory. By placing Harry and Meghan in the spotlight as desperate caricatures who crash royal events and scream for attention, South Park wasn't just poking fun. It was revealing the absurdity of trying to win sympathy and relevance at the same time. The show presented the Sussexes not as victims or revolutionaries, but as addicts, addicted to attention, addicted to visibility, and addicted to controlling a narrative that has long slipped from their hands. Compare that to how the royal family was depicted. While not central to the episode, they were represented by the stoic Queen's guards and, most importantly, by Princess Kate. The guards, who physically removed Harry and Meghan from the balcony, didn't say a word. They didn't make a statement. They didn't explain their actions. They simply acted, quickly, efficiently, and without drama. The satire spoke volumes. When faced with chaos, the crown doesn't engage, it removes the problem. This moment is representative of the core difference in strategy. The royal family relies on mystique, ritual, and consistency. They don't feed the press beast, they starve it of scandal. Even during major crises, like Andrew's disgrace, Meghan's accusations of racism, or Harry's exposés, the monarchy remains mute. This silence, paradoxically, often amplifies their power. The less they say, the more the public fills in the gaps with speculation that, over time, burns itself out. Harry and Meghan, on the other hand, keep the cycle alive by responding. Every slight is a statement. Every rumor is a headline. Every moment is a new opportunity for PR management. The result? Exhaustion, public fatigue, media overexposure, and satire thrives in that exhaustion. South Park's success wasn't just in its mockery, it was in its timing. The show aired at a moment when the public's patience with the